You're saying there's no
How can you fix what you don't know, right? You're based on if you have exposure to America, you can understand how to make Ghana or whatever part in Africa better. That's what I'm saying.
But that isn't
No,
the case, though.
I know they raised you up. I'm saying, like, because you're trying to make it feel like, oh, you can only be.
Hey guys, it's your girl Zenobia. Welcome back to the African Millennials.
Hey,
Aquaba, y'all. All right, so we're gonna get started today. Milan, can you let us know?
All right.
Hey, let's get it.
Okay, we have a question from a viewer. Dear AMs, what's the difference between Africans born here versus Africans born in Africa? This is from Tiffany, Ghanaian in the Bronx. Ooh.
Hey,
She's repping Ghana. All right, so let's get to this. I'll have the ladies start.
Oh, that's nice of you.
very chivalrous of you. Trying to redeem yourself.
Amen.
Okay.
So what's
All right,
up?
what's the differences? I think that Africans born here have a lot more freedoms compared to Africans born in Africa. I think they're a little more reckless, you know, in their behavior because their environment affects who they are. Yeah, they have they're more like loose free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of feel that way too. But I think that like Africans that are born in Africa are more disciplined. I think
Right.
they're more structured. You know, like they know that their parents are more stricter, so they have to go to school. You come home, you cook, go to church. I think there's more of a structure there, and I think they're. I shouldn't say I think they're smarter, but I do think they're smarter because I think Africans born in Africa are smarter than Africans born in America because they do things by hand. They don't have the luxury of internet all the time and calculators. I think they're smarter than us.
I'll spin on both. I mean, there's definitely a case that Americans are more free, but I feel like it's dependent on the home you come from too. Because I grew up with kids that had all the freedom in the world that were second generation Nigerian, Ghanaian, whatever, had all the freedom in the world because their parents were like, oh, as long as you're not hanging out with this crowd, whatever. But then you meet the parents that are like, just because you're in this country, you have to be even more, I have to be even more strict with you. So I feel like it really just depends on the family. I wouldn't say better. I feel like it's all very subjective, right? There is no better for me. I feel like because of my family's class standing and social standing back there, I feel like it wouldn't be a detriment to them for them to have that experience, to go home and really experience how Nigeria is as a whole. You know, how people think, how people, you know, use their means and what they have to survive. I think all those lessons that I learned growing up is the reason why I was able to mature faster in the States when I came, you know, when I would go and come back. So I would just like for my kids to have a well-rounded upbringing versus just having them in the United States and expecting them to pick up all the nuances of global culture.
Yes,
Personally.
but picking up off of what Zenobia said in terms of like Africans being smarter, I think that we have to be more specific with that though, because I think that the intelligence you were speaking to is more of a domesticity. You know what I'm saying? People are just aware how to survive a little bit more than what we can do. Exactly. So I think that on that same front, I would argue that Africans that grow up in the States have more exposure and thus have ability to critically think about issues that people back home are just not worried about. I mean, because they have other concerns, but our intelligences are different, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I feel like in terms of like being born in Africa, I think it's better than being born in America because like me, I was born back home and I feel like if I was born in America, I wouldn't have turned out the way I am. Like I have a lot more respect for elders, for people. like you're raised by family. Like here, being born in America, like it's just you and your parents. And if your parents are not around, like it's the streets that are raising you or your school that's raising you. And I feel like being born back home, like the environment is more stable, because if your parents are not home, your auntie's instilling the same values that your parents would instill. Instead of like, oh, when you leave the house, there's this whole different set of rules, there's this whole different language that you speak. Like back home is more consistency. Like you're being raised by a village, you have more respect, and like you don't have as many excuses for failure or not doing that people here have.
That's true.
Growing up in Benin, like you're raised by a village. Like you can go outside and play. You're playing with like cousins. You're playing with neighborhood kids. Like there's always an adult by. Like it's very communal compared to America, where it's like just a family, and maybe even if you do have someone outside of the family raising you, they're being paid and it's a job for them, and it's not really like a community-based like upbringing or childhood.
I want to elaborate on the Africans are smarter back home. At first I thought you were referring to like the educational system.
Yeah, I was.
Because
that's what it was.
because the education, like I only lived there for like 2 years, and it's completely different from over here. In America, everything is more hands-on, like like a little bit more of the practical. In Africa, everything is like cramming, like people live and breathe school over there for the most part. So when they come to America, they like passing. So I do agree, like intelligent-wise, like as far as like the education system is concerned.
Because see, but I would still disagree with that though, because I went to school in Ghana, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Africans are not intelligent. I think some of the smartest people I've ever met are born and raised in Africa. But however, I would say that I don't think that cramming and like being able to perform well on tests is determinant of your intelligence. You know what I'm saying? Like, in fact, I met so many people that were able to memorize and regurgitate, but in terms of being able to break that down for themselves, they weren't able to. And so in a sense, I think intelligence is being able to take something and break it down and being able to either make it simple for other people or just be able to put some sort of spin onto it. But a lot of the times our education systems in Ghana especially require that you take in and spit out. Exactly. There's no room for you to think or reprocess. I would disagree. There are so many more options in the States. Would
you say book smart?
I was saying book smart.
Because I understand that society has ingrained in us that in order to test someone's mental ability, that we need to do so through performance on tests. But that's not a determinant of how intelligent you are, what you're actually capable of, because so many of our education systems end up requiring that you just take in what you read from a textbook and regurgitate it on a piece of paper. Intelligence should be monitored off of, or rather decided off of, critical thinking ability. What can you do with the knowledge that you're given? How else do you understand it? Can you break it down and explain it to someone else? Can you take that information and do something greater with it?
But let me tell you, we don't have things like that. There's a lot of schools, unless you go to like a portfolio-based school, if you go to a regular public school, you're going to school to take a Regents, and that's determined. You're going to school to take your SATs. That's determining like what college you're gonna get into. So it is a lot of like, I feel like education as a whole that's the only way to test like what you're learning. Not that it's good, but that's how we measure your intelligence.
No, but even back home in like the education, in our education, it's just different. It's like you have to learn. It's like chew and pour. We grew up in a in school whereby you have to chew and then pour it. Whereas in America you have to actually understand.
You have to understand. Yes.
Sometimes you might pass a test, but when they ask you this and that you cannot.
You can't say. No one is asking. So I think the key is that no one. I disagree because you have a likeliness for a teacher here to ask you, what do you think about this? As opposed to no one is asking you that in back home, and that's why I'm saying that in terms of intelligence, like of course we understand that testing typically is the way people determine that, but I'm not gonna say that because you perform better on a test means that you are smarter if you're not able to think about things in a bigger way.
I want to ask you a question
though. Even here, that's how your
I don't think
like
it's a
you're
location
validated.
Thing. I don't think it's a location thing. I
was
think
gonna
that
say
they're-
so-
they're-
so
in
let me-
Africa and America, when the educational system from the point you're a kid to the point you graduate college, it's a memory test. I agree with you there. But at the same time, I think the society in Africa and society here is what determines what you do with the memory, right? The educational system here encourages critical thinking, encourages expanding, encourages applying what you learn into, your effects in society. Boom, boom, boom. Over there, everybody's pretty much conditioned to survive. So nobody's really concerned with changing, and if they are concerned with changing, they do it the laziest way possible because they're just trying to make sure food's on the table.
Right.
So it's just a different set of priorities, like both of you said earlier. It's just,
But the reason why I originally said that is because, like I said, they don't have as many resources there in Africa like they do here. The math that they're doing is by hand on the paper, and that's the reason why I feel that way. Here in America, you can ask a kid, oh, what's 2,000 by 246 divided by this? And I feel like an African child will be able to do that on paper. But kids here are so lenient on calculators.
Yes.
You can use a calculator on your test. They don't have that luxury
Right.
there.
No, they
So
do.
when it comes to certain subjects, I do feel
Depends.
as though they
Are you
learn
talking
certain
about
things
college
better.
or just
In
high school
general.
or in general?
Well, with convenience.
Because even here we don't really use calculators.
schools
Some
that
schools
No,
do.
my high school, we
But
use a
I went to
calculator
high
for
school-
everything
but I went
on
to
my
high-
test and everything.
In Africa or here?
Here.
But back home, I went to high school back home and we use calculators.
depends
Here,
on where you go to school.
But it depends on where you go to school, though.
I
about
think
location
yes,
again.
but
It's
I
not
also
about
think
location.
that we have to pay attention to the fact that class takes a big role in this conversation because regardless of either or, like you can have a very similar experience to someone in the States growing up in Africa if you have the money.
Correct.
You know what I'm
Depends on where
saying?
you
So
grew up. Because if I'm in the hood, we're probably not using calculators.
Right.
Yeah.
We're probably doing by hand, and that's
By hand.
back
They
home
own
too.
budgets.
There's
Right.
hoods back home
Right.
too. But if you're going to a private school in Lagos that's ran by people that have millions of dollars every year, you
They're gonna have
probably have calculators, laptops, all that stuff, just like you would
But
have.
where did you go to
I went
school?
to school in
I mean,
Ghana.
that's
Let
not-
me tell you-
Where?
but
Where
you
in
didn't-
Ghana?
You probably went to a good school.
No. I went to a regular school.
Mila,
But you
where?
didn't grow up in Ghana.
Yo,
though.
Mila.
I've been.
Did you
I've been
go to
Niger-
school in
I've been to
Nigeria?
Nigeria. I've been to schools in Nigeria. I've seen how they
Oh,
operate.
no.
But where did you go to school in Ghana?
I feel like Tunde doesn't have the experience I have because I actually was born in Africa. I went to school in Africa. He was born here in America. He went to school here. He only visited. So the little knowledge he knows about African school, that's what he's implying when we was talking about it. But then he really doesn't know. Back home, we still use calculators. Like in high school and even in primary school, we were allowed to use calculators for math class and for math tests.
No.
You use calculators.
Mila.
Let me finish, please. Chill. Let me finish. You use calculators in school in Ghana. It doesn't have to be big. Whether this school is a rich school or a poor school. In math, calculators are required.
In Nigeria, that's
In
not true.
Ghana, yes.
In Nigeria,
Everywhere in Ghana.
Everywhere
I'll tell you
in
right now
Ghana.
for a fact, in Nigeria, that is not
And-
true. So maybe it's a Ghana,
Oh,
Nigeria
maybe, well,
thing.
But we're not
calculators
talking
are
about just
required.
Ghana, though. We're talking about
Africa.
Africa.
as a whole.
But we can't talk about.
I feel
we
like
haven't been to-
I feel like one thing is like I would love to raise my children, like have them be born back home or like spend their early years
Their
back
formative
home.
years, absolutely.
Because I want them to be like, I want them to have that, like, one, be in tune with their culture. Two, understand where they come from. That family is important. Like, have those basic skills. Because I feel like if they're born here and raised here in their early years, it's gonna be hard to now teach them. Because those, like, as soon as they step out the house, it's conflicting. Like, whatever they're seeing, the things that
But
they're
you know
being
what?
exposed
I have
to
to
is
say
different.
something. Like I feel like it's also based on the parents because at home, my mom always said, outside is France, at home is Congo. We're gonna eat the food. We're gonna speak the language. We're gonna, we're gonna re-practice as if we were back home. Even though it's harder because you live in a European country. But every friend of my mom were aunties and uncles. Like I didn't even know
but
their
how
first
much
names.
time do you spend at home?
Not much.
Not that much, but the fact that you have already that, like as a kid, I knew already that I couldn't, do certain things at home that I did at school. I feel like it definitely has to be how your parents raised you at home. Even though you're right that as soon as you leave the house, it's not home anymore, it's not Africa anymore. You are in the European environment. So that's the conflict of interest right there. But if you have that base at home, I think the kid could turn out to be fine.
Let me ask you something. How big of an impact how much percentage of an impact does the home even play? Because like they said earlier,
70% for me.
How many hours did you spend at home though? You gotta think about that.
That's true, because when I was a kid, after school, I was in after-school program activities and this and that.
Yep.
And when I go home just to eat and go to sleep.
Right.
And I'm only getting
spend time at
and
home.
I'm only getting Saturday and Sunday at home.
I feel like there's a disconnect when like people are being taught one thing at home, and then when they go outside, like the rules have changed. So someone can be taught to be respectful at home, and then in school when they disrespect somebody or joke on somebody, all the kids are laughing. Like that's a disconnect. Like to be honest, like we're home a couple of hours a day. We're home in the morning and then back in the evening to eat and sleep. Like we didn't really speak English in my house. I was taught English at school, and I barely have an accent. So it tells you how much you're being taught outside. It tells you how much society is really teaching you, as opposed to the certain number of hours you spend in the household.
What about if we talk about even the teachers, right? Because I think back home, the teachers are always on strike because they're underpaid. The government they don't give two shit about, the teachers actually. And the people who sort of suffer the corollaries are, the students. Because even back home, I remember a couple years ago, students even miss 12 months of school.
Yeah.
So after that, what are they gonna do? There's even certain teachers who are not even properly skilled. So we have to talk about that as well. So, you might have, you probably, formed, back home, probably for my case in Benin. So if you're not properly skilled, so why are you going to teach to the students?
Kids, I feel like kids that are born, Africans that are born here, have more freedom, like I said earlier, because, you're allowed to bring guy friends home. And for me, it was... Actually, yes, you are. Let me tell you something. I believe that Africans born here have more freedom, or their parents are more open-minded of them bringing girlfriends and boyfriend home, because that's the culture here. People date young, and they mature faster. First of all, we don't have prom in France. I don't know in Africa.
We have prom in Africa.
But y'all from in Africa?
Okay, see, that's different. France and America, that's a big,
We're gonna talk about Africa. I don't think that if some African countries have something like prom, I'm not sure. But okay, maybe they do.
dance.
But I do know that being raised as an African woman at home, bringing a guy, to my house as my date, I was shy, I was uncomfortable, because first of all, at home we don't talk about, guys and dating and sex. We don't talk about that. So the fact that at school I'm having this event called prom where you get to go and dance and stay late. First of all, I had to be home early before the sun goes down. So that was a whole different feeling for me to bring this guy home and be like, oh, mom, this is my date, or this is my boyfriend, I'm going to the movies. That's something that you could do here.
It's separate
compared to Africa.
It's separate in the family, like he said. Some families back home are very open. I know, but I went to prom in Africa.
Could you sleep over at a girl's house, a friend's house like this?
I started sleeping. I started sleeping when I was like 14 years old. Back home, we still have prom, so it's still dependent on the parents. We have really, really strict parents here in America. And even when you come to them and you tell them prom, they'll be like, no, you're not going to prom. Stay home with me. Because they already did. Okay, no, Africans are not allowed to bring boyfriends and girlfriends, because you wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah, my mom didn't want me to go to prom.
Because
it had to be, my dad had to be the one to be like, nah, just let him.
He has to go to prom.
Yeah, my mom, you know what my mom was thinking? My mom was already thinking, oh, you gonna have sex with a girl, you gonna get her pregnant, this and that. And I'm just like, nah, we just gonna go there, we're gonna dance, and we're gonna have a good time.
But did you?
I did at the end of the day.
All right.
Yeah, because I had had dad on the side.
You get to do more. Like you get to do more things here than back home. I feel like
Opportunity is another thing.
I
Opportunity is another thing.
I think it's
certain
I think it's the
opportunities
house
people didn't have in Africa. I'm pretty sure if they had like proms in Africa, people would go. I'm pretty sure.
I was able to go to junior prom and prom here, not a problem. But I think because I just respected my parents too much, I wouldn't just bring girls home. Like it was just a personal decision for me to not introduce random joints to my mom. Like I respect my parents that much. That was just me. But I have cousins that were just as free as I was and would bring girls home. They would take them to the basement, play video games.
Can I bring up this
girlfriends
point?
and girlfriends?
The only reason why, like, as much as I really do want to raise my kids and base them in this culture, the key that you're bringing up is the ability to see both.
Discernment.
Yes, like the great thing about being raised in Western culture is that you can see things. You can see other lives, and then they're not as shocking to you. You can then start to make decisions best fit to you. You know what I'm saying? The problem that I have with back home is that everyone is kind of doing. Not everyone. Most of the people are doing, the same thing. It's group thing. And so you don't find people. That's why you're so shocked when you see somebody with the pink hair. You know what I'm saying? It's out of the norm. And that's why. I love my country. I love my people. I love my home. I want to raise my kids home. But that's also with the understanding that there is access and exposure in the Western culture. They can be based there. And that's great. You get this discipline. You have this world of culture that you're able to embrace. But then after that, I want to put my children in a place where if they wanted to learn anything else, if they wanted to see something else other than the typical groupthink and like-minded people that is our society, I'm going to bring them to the Western world because you're going to have exposure here. You're going to have access. And that's just the truth. But of course you need that balance. I'm not saying that I want my kids to be based at home, but I need them to have exposure to the outside world to see other things because you need to understand that there are other ways to living life that are different and perhaps better for you than what is told to you and constantly every day with the people that are around you.
There are neighborhoods in America that are like that too, though.
Yes.
But like you can still see it. You have TV, you have social media,
That's true.
You have way more access. I feel like one thing we cannot argue about is the fact that in Western culture, you have more access to see these things.
Sure.
Even though you have families doing, like some Western things in Africa, the likelihood of seeing it is low.
Especially now.
That's not enough.
More than ever.
That's not enough, experience are two different things, though.
Yeah,
I need
that's
my
not
children,
enough.
like, I feel like at least up to, like, age 4, age 5, they should be back home because that's where you shape them.
Yeah.
And then they can live the rest of their lives in Western culture because they already have that backbone. Like, I work with high school kids, like, and their parents are never home, barely home because their parents are working, doing all this stuff. And it's the streets that's raising them. It's their friends, and that I can't have that. I need them to be
with you, though. I'm agreeing with you.
Like have some type of background back home, that strict, that familial like upbringing, and then from then they can like. I just feel like just seeing it on TV and living it are two different things. It's never gonna be
impression with TV. Though with TV, you get a false impression about
a lot
family.
of stereotypes.
Stereotypes.
You're not gonna raise your kids based off like African movies, like you know what I'm saying.
But this is what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that it's important to base your child in the culture, but the exposure and the access of living in the Western culture and seeing these things to say, okay, does this work for me or not, is stronger than being at home and staying at home and that being the only thing that you see unless you see it on TV.
Can I be honest with you? A lot of people in America are not geographically aware. They feel like America is the center of the world, and it's not their fault. It's once again the educational system teaches them that. Listen, this is what when I was growing up, what they taught us about Africa was 10 cents a day could feed a kid, you know what I'm saying? So basically,
monkeys, AIDS.
But you know what I'm saying? I'm from there, and I know this is all a lie. This is all the front. And then you got people like, do y'all walk lions? Like y'all have?
Exactly.
And I'm just like, I think it's crazy up till today that people still believe that in Africa people have lions as pet. Live in trees, walk around barefooted. There's huts, all of that. Whereas like. If we want to refer to like parts of Africa, there's a lot of countries in Africa where they are like well developed. We have buildings, house establishments, everything, businesses. So I feel like when you want to stay in that mentality where you think Africa is just stagnant continent, I feel like it's ignorant. But as I got older, I realized the reason why they're even teaching us any of this is to make America look great and make themselves look wonderful. So as growing up, even as Black Americans and African Americans, they're like, I don't want to be a part of that country.
Yeah.
And so they do that for every other country.
My point is, I completely agree with what you're saying, but my point is that at the end of the day, you have working Wi-Fi that won't quit on you when you Google what is happening outside of America if you wanted. A lot of people don't have those opportunities back home, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that like, oh, for either or, like you're just seeing one thing. You can, but in the States or just whatever part of the West that you want to be in, you have the opportunity if you wanted to look outside of your bubble, as opposed to people that are down there that really don't have that chance.
I think when we're saying that life is better in America than it is in Africa, it's very specific, right? It's not to say that you enjoy life more here or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, it's specifically like you don't have the same concerns as a lot of people in developing countries or continents. Like, that's just what the truth is. Like, in America, you're not worried about food. You're not worried about where you're going to live. There are just so many different systems within our government that allow you to not think of that and alleviates you so that you can sit here and worry about, okay, but I'm not in tune with my culture. I don't know my uncle, my auntie. Like, your concerns are just different. It's not necessarily just about one life is better than other. We just have access to more and privileges that most don't.
Nah, all right, Bridget, I see what you're saying. I get you. But you also have to understand that with the whole internet is also like a strength and a weakness as well. A lot of people rely on the internet so much that a lot of people in America are not willing to travel outside of America. Whereas in Africa, I feel like people had the zeal is more to like get outside of Africa.
Yeah.
So that's why
it's because they don't know that they want to see.
Yeah, they
it builds that
experience.
Curiosity. But here in America, you have the internet, you can see, and with propaganda and the media and news and all of this stuff, the propaganda is like, your kids are going to learn what the government wants your kids to learn. Right. They block out these things. They don't let them see certain things, and that's why these young Black American kids think that Africans live in huts and walk lions and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying?
Just seeing it and the experience it's just, you cannot compare.
I just felt like the mentality of Africans were born here has been sort of carried away, because I just felt like being on social media and being, okay, I'm all Black, African and stuff like that, but what actually have you done to Africa? What actually, you don't need to, to have money in order to empower your country. You don't need to have money in order to provide sort of help and hope to people who need it the most. So I just felt like it's sort of a trend to be African, but at the end of the day, do you identify yourself? Do you feel like you can go back home and invest and create jobs and stuff like that? Those are the stuff like that I want to hear, And
so and also the living condition here is way better.
Much better.
To Africa.
Absolutely.
Like even like when you were saying you want to take your kids back home so that to learn the custom, you don't even hear that in an African home. The only time you don't. The only time you hear an African saying, "I will take you back home," is when they misbehave. That's a sort of
I disagree. Why should going back home be a punishment? No, it's not a struggle. It should not be a punishment to go back home and to beat on your own homeland. That should never be a punishment. Yes, the rules are stricter. Yes, like they said, there's more freedom. You get to do whatever you want to do.
I know they raised you up. I'm saying, like, because you're trying to make it feel like, you can only be modeled to be a good kid when you're in Africa. No. In some homes, in like my home, I have nieces, I have nephews. No, when you fuck up, you get beat up. Like I beat my nephews.
When you fuck up and you get beat up at home, but when you do the same thing at school, people laugh and clap you on. Is that not a disconnect? Is that not a disconnect?
Yes.
I don't get it.
Exactly.
I don't
let me
get
tell you why.
it.
Let me tell you why I disagree. Let me tell you why this is my personal experience. My mom took all of her kids and sent them to Nigeria simultaneously.
Why did she do
We weren't misbehaving.
You guys was.
Nah, we were not misbehaving. No. I'm gonna tell you why. Let me tell you why. Because she was like, I need y'all to experience what Nigeria feels like.
Absolutely.
I need y'all to know what that feels like.
But I don't think it has to do with discipline. I don't think that your parents are sending you there as a punishment. They send you there because they feel like, okay, you being here, you acting like these kids, you not being respectful, you're not being this. You need to go home so you can get those key fundamentals.
You know why they do this is, like you said earlier, in Africa you have more people raising you. It's not just the family. You have the neighbors, you have the auntie, people that don't even know you in the street. If they see you talking crazy to your mom, they'll correct you. Of course, compared to here. Compared to here, however, to the point that you made earlier, I agree. If a parent, because at home we did the on your knees, put your hands up, and then have the books there. We had the shikats, or we had the legs up on the wall. Like we had all kind of different stuff that my mom did to us.
Agreed that when you go back home, just being back home shapes you better.
It does,
right?
That's
But
fair.
I feel like using going back home as a weapon or as a threat is what I do not agree with. Because that's gonna make people not want to be scared of going back home. Like, what's so bad about it? If we're gonna keep using it as a weapon, that's not attractive.
It's all psychological, and it's not about location, because it happens here too. If you're doing something bad, and every time you do something bad, I tell you, hey, here is your punishment. Even if it's supposed to be something endearing, you're gonna look at it as, oh, this is what happens when I do bad.
I think it's a location thing, because why kids back home want to come to America or want to come to TV? We did say earlier that no, it is punishment.
That has definitely been a psychological thing with our people. When there's trouble or when somebody's misbehaving, I can only speak for the Nigerian household I came from. I don't know how other households do it. But I know that in my house, whenever I would get in trouble as a kid, the main threat was always, keep playing, we're gonna send you to boarding school. We're gonna send you to Nigeria. And it was always like, it was the boogeyman in our house. It was like, if you mess up, you will be shipped on a boat or a plane to Nigeria.
They said earlier that they don't have, the access like we have it here to see the Western world. So why do they want to come here and stay here so bad?
It's a perception thing. Some homes do. It's not an overarching universal thing. You cannot project and say everybody's living one experience because they are here. That is wrong.
That's true.
I think the reason why people want to come into America is just job opportunities, You can have
opportunities, period.
Yes,
because people
absolutely.
Life security.
Absolutely.
Financial security. Educational.
Health security.
Health security.
Yes.
You know how many people just want to come here because maybe they were born with something, or they got something, they want to get treatment. They either have to go to America or India to get treated for this thing correctly, because the risk of them dying in whatever country they are in Africa is so much higher because of whether it's untrained medical staff or just the lack of supplies or the lack of
unsanitary places.
Is there anything like health insurance?
So we all agree
that being here is better. That's what you're kind of
that's what
leading towards.
Not necessarily, but I just feel like being here is more appealing to people that aren't from here because they see this. Because
I just
Whoa!
not you. Like being born here sounds more appealing to like.
What do you mean ungrateful?
I'm very grateful.
Because like the way he sounded, because he was born here, he doesn't see the other side.
Bro, I go to Nigeria often.
You go to Nigeria often.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you one thing about being born. I feel like ideally, if I was to have kids, if they're born in America, they're gonna be raised back home for a few years.
So that would not change anything.
Yes, it would. First of all, yes, it would.
But no,
Yes,
the
it
kids
would.
back home are
Let me
really
tell you
bad.
one
Like
thing.
even
all of them.
no, the same here too. The same here too.
Let
It
me tell
doesn't
you
matter where you raise your kids.
Let me tell you one reason why I would even birth them in America, because for them to get the paper situation, that's a whole nother hassle. So let them have their papers, go back home, stay there for 4 or 5 years. Build yourself, form yourself into a decent person, come back here and use the stuff that you learned and mix it into the society.
That's what you have to do. You have to make sure it happens here in America. As an African
something.
I feel like the kids born or my classmates that were born in America are just whining, and I feel like they were ungrateful. What I feel like they should do is to really thank their parents. First of all, it's really hard to come to America, and the system back home in Africa is really bad. Transportation-wise, even schools, and even the economy. African parents, if you're raising your kids here, you should be responsible for your kids here.
But a lot of parents are responsible.
Okay, if you're sending them back home, right?
Right.
For 5 years, who are you sending them back home
I will
to?
family.
You will leave your job and go to and stay.
I will go back and forth. I don't want my
You
kids.
go back and forth. You're not
Yo,
there to supervise them.
Bro, you're not, first of all, you can't tell me what I'm gonna do with my kids. I'm gonna do what I wanna do with my kids.
Okay, take them back home.
I'm not just gonna dump my kids back home for 5 years and never
That's what
see
you
them.
just said. You want to
seen
leave
it
your
work.
kids
Bro,
back.
if
It doesn't work.
I
I've
raise
seen that
my
scenario
She's not
work,
saying
bro.
that she's gonna go drop her kids off. She just wants her kids to live there. That don't mean she's not gonna go there.
What would that change? That's what I'm trying to get.
What would that change?
It will-
Where were you born?
So you don't see
I was
these
born
kids?
back home.
You were born
You
back
wouldn't
home.
be
Yes,
who you
he
were
was
if you
born
weren't
here,
born
right?
back there, son. I don't
But
care,
what
B.
happened? So does it mean?
You wouldn't be the
would not
person
be the
you
Milan
are
you
right
are
now
today.
if you weren't born back home.
Yo, don't be
You probably wouldn't even be on the show. Don't even do that, man.
Yes, I just agree.
Milan is speaking, like, Milan is assuming that I want to just dump my kids off and then bring them back. Like, my point is, like, I want them to have a certain type of foundation. And yes, I am acknowledging the privileges that America offers. I am acknowledging the better access to healthcare, education. I'm acknowledging the better access to like internet and information as a whole. I'm acknowledging that. However, if my children are exposed to those accesses and those privileges without a good foundation, they may misuse those things.
I can't believe when Tsunami said she's gonna taking her kids back home is gonna mold them. First of all, you said you're just gonna leave them and then come back to America, so you don't know what situation they're in. And even if they're being raised by their grandmom is gonna spoil them. So that's how I
You be on
feel.
social media and you see these kids on social media cursing and saying the N-word and doing all these things.
You think that would have been you?
Their environment
Oh, you on
shaped
social
that.
media? We're talking about social media,
No,
right?
I'm talking about it's the fact that their parents show that. That's how, whether these kids don't know what Instagram and Facebook is. They are 3, 4, 5 years old. They just know that,
Their
okay,
experiences,
exactly.
program them.
But you're not going to tell me
school,
that it's
that's it.
okay for a 3, 4, 5-year-old to be cursing
I'm not saying
and doing all of these
okay, but at the
things.
same time,
But they
there's
won't
3,
be
5
doing
year
that back
olds.
home.
They do it back home. We're talking
Let
about.
me tell something to support Tsunami's point. The reason why
I don't think that kids back home don't use curse words at all, but they don't freely talk like that. Like, they're not gonna do that in front of their parents, their uncles, their aunts at all. But kids here do that. When they see a camera, they wanna do it even more, and they publicize it. Like, Milan, back home, these kids are not doing what the kids are doing here. They're not cursing and saying, yeah, bitch, yeah, this, that. They're not coming down the poles in the playgrounds. They're not doing those things.
They
They're
are
not
doing that.
those
The reason why
things.
you're not seeing this because most of them don't have access to the internet and social media.
Listen,
That's a hood everywhere, though.
listen.
That's every hood everywhere.
You have-
Everywhere,
you said you
everywhere.
have
Listen, every
That's not a
country,
location thing. That's everywhere.
every country it just like here in New York, every borough has the hood and has a rich area. In Ghana, we have Accra, and then there's everything else. I'm not talking about kids that are born in Accra, because in Accra is the city. Like, they're gonna get to see those
But it's
things.
Africa,
true.
though.
No,
You're
it's
talking
not
about
the
Africa.
same thing. You're not gonna tell me that if you in Kofodia that they don't even have running water in Kofodia. So you're gonna tell me that in Kofodia that they're gonna those kids are doing those things?
But kids in Koforia are kids. Do you see that? No, because you don't have what? Access to the internet. So you can't sit here and
It's
say,
not
oh,
about them
the kids in
cursing or
Koforia-
not. It's about
If
if
they
they
don't have
cursing.
access to the internet, how they gonna learn these curse words? Where they getting it from?
Oh, from the
From
hood,
what-
from the
Yeah,
neighborhood,
yeah,
from whatever's going on in the neighborhood.
Listen, I'm a product of what I'm talking about.
Same.
And I
Same
believe,
here
I
too,
believe
but-
I'm bomb because I was born back home and they instilled those values in me.
Yeah.
America taught me a lot of things, and I could have gone a lot of different ways, but I still
Listen,
remember
living here
where
and
I
raising
come
a
from.
child
Bridget,
here is different.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, my personal experience, the foundation that I was given from my grandparents and my parents growing up is the reason why I developed into the person I am. You know, I have cousins that didn't necessarily have the same foundation. Their parents were a little more lenient, or their parents didn't really see the importance of teaching them Yoruba or teaching them how to cook the food, or how to have the certain norms and stuff, like greeting your parents in the morning before you walk out of the house. Just like little things like that stick with me to this day.
I think what I really think about this situation is that when I was talking about earlier about job opportunities, because back home you can have your master degree or PhD or whatever and still be jobless.
Yes.
Because
yes,
I feel
for
like
years.
yeah,
For years.
and I feel like the government hasn't sort of created a conducive environment for companies to create jobs. So that's the reason why there's those illegal immigrants. I mean, the percentage of illegal immigrants has sort of increased exponentially just because they're just sick and tired of this situation. So I just think that there's a definitely an advantage of being raised in stuff in
What
America.
he's saying is true. Like, you can go to school and then finish, and then you will not get a job. That's why the only people popping in Africa are the scammers, the hoes, and the politicians. Because that's the only way you can survive. Yeah, it's true. In Africa, the only people you see popping are the drug dealers, the hoes, the politicians, and the scammers. Like,
I just want to be clear, though. It's like, I appreciate Tsunami's passion about this whole thing, because I feel the same way about raising my kids back home. But I feel like I have to acknowledge that at the end of the day, the reason why we're able to be on this stage and talk about going back home and improving life there, if we're talking about even the option to say, I will born my kids here and then raise them back home, is because of the privilege you have
Thank
of
you.
being in the Western culture. And so that's why but I think that what Milan has been saying has been getting misconstrued. Like, I know that he said the ungrateful thing, so that threw everybody off. But it's like, listen,
like
it's
that.
not about not
grateful.
appreciating the baseline of the culture that being raised in Africa gives you. I wish I had that. But the reason why I wish I had that and wish I was plugged into that culture is because I don't have to worry about so many other things that people back home are worrying about, like food and shelter and this and that. And like,
I'm not denying that privilege, though. I'm just saying that I need a part of their lives to be based there,
Yes,
so that at least they
agreed.
can have something to even go back to. At least they can recognize, oh snap, I used to play here. I used to, like, when you go back after, like, let's say I wasn't born back home and I go back for the first time now. There's so much that I have to learn. I want to eliminate that process.
But we also
But
have
this
to
is
be-
what I'm saying. But this is what I'm saying.
you said 5 years that you want them to stay there for their first 5 years.
You're still
As
bringing them
yeah,
back
you're still
here
bringing them here,
because
right?
you understand
What
that
says
their
they're
privilege
gonna,
is
5 years, are they
Wait,
going to
wait,
remember?
That's what I said.
Are they they want 5 years from 1 to 5?
their
Would you remember what I'm talking about? Do you remember your first 5 years?
You're talking about remembering experiences, but at the end
You will not remember
No,
your
it's not about remembering experiences. It's about being structured. You're gonna act a certain way.
You're talking. Well, listen. You're talking about conscious experiences. When you go somewhere and you live somewhere for 5 years and your foundation changes, that's subconscious and conscious, bro. That doesn't leave you ever.
Yeah.
That is
Can I
the
say something?
foundation
You
of
don't
your
have to
entire-
remember what
that
you
is
watched
the
on TV
foundation
when you
of
were
the
3.
rest of
Can I
your
say
life.
something?
I remember my friends. I remember the people that I
About
grew
to
up
violate.
with, because again, right at this age, we still have technology. I'm not denying our privilege. I'm acknowledging the privilege that I can even travel back and forth because I'm citizen here. However, like, once you're based there, once you're born there, like, you keep in touch with family. You know auntie this, you know cousin this, because you guys
doesn't
grew
help.
up
You know
together.
it does.
All right,
It
stop.
doesn't
What
help.
you mean? How does it
We
not help? How?
Milan, maybe
We're talking about how is you knowing auntie this and auntie that getting you a job?
Let me give you a personal.
No, we was talking about job security, like job condition, or job opportunities. And she's saying when you raise your kids back home, then they will know auntie this, auntie that. And then when you raise your kids back home, you can let them know, still know auntie this and auntie that. We have FaceTime. We have
You're talking about
aunties
2018.
name.
You know, y'all ignoring something. Y'all ignoring something.
So are you going to tell me you're going to, even if you're raising let's say you're raising your kids here in America, right? You don't have the finance to take them back home. What would you do?
Introduce them to family here that have the same values and norms as I do, and do the same thing here.
So does that mean you're not going to talk to them about auntie so and so back home in Africa?
It's not about location.
Don't do
Let
that.
me do that. Let me tell you. You know what?
That's
Let me tell you. I would do that because when I was in Ghana, but you know I'm half Ghanaian. My mom's side my mom is from Benin. Her mom is in Benin, whatnot. I've never been to Benin. But then every day my mom do mention her name, so I know I have an auntie in Benin.
But you don't have a
She
relationship
speaks.
with her.
No, I talk to her on the phone anytime my mom calls her. Oh hey, I want to talk to your kids.
Well, you're
And then,
so not
you
everybody
know what I'm
has that.
saying?
Not
So
everybody
even
has
though
that.
I've never been to Benin, I still know. I have aunties in Benin. I know their names. I know their kids. I know I have nephews and nieces back home in Benin. So even though my mom still hasn't taken me to Benin, she's still showing me, telling me, okay, you have this, you have that in Benin. This is how you grew up. She's still telling me, teaching me the culture. I don't see why you cannot do that
Milan.
with your kids
I
here.
can't why
And
because
then-
I can't
Let me tell you why she
Because
can't
then
do
you-
that.
I
because-
have aunts that don't have phone, like I can't call them. They don't have cell phones that I can call them whenever I feel like
Same.
it. When I went to Ghana and I spent my time in Ghana, I caught malaria, and I had an aunt that took so much good care of me. Like I can still see her face now, but she don't have a phone for me to call her when I feel like it. The point of that is what I'm saying is you're talking about, oh, you can FaceTime, you can do this, you can do that.
That's your privilege.
If it
That's your
was not
privilege
for
talking,
that, that's
bro.
the privilege part. If it was not for that, I would not have a relationship with her, period. I was with her in person. She held me. She took care of me there in Ghana. So that's why I have a relationship with her. If I lived here and I never went to Ghana and my mom was like, oh, well, you have Auntie Baba in Kumasi, that doesn't mean nothing to me. Where's the connection there?
I have nephews and nieces who were born here in America, but still I like their parents are teaching them their culture. Like they speak Ghanaian language, they eat Ghanaian food. You dare not bring a boy home. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it's the way your parents raise you. It has nothing to do with you being in Africa. What difference would it make? There's kids in Africa who are like equally bad. Like someone was saying, kids in Africa don't care. They do care. Like when you beat a kid back home, he will insult you, he will call you, Mumami Kwasia, he will run away. You will not even see him anywhere again. Like he will just. It's equally like bad.
What do you want to say? Because you like busting out your seat.
Thank you. Y'all ignoring something about the social aspect of the difference between America and
I was just
Africa.
going to talk about that too.
The thing about it is that although America has like better opportunities, better resources, whatever, yada, 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 I feel like socially Africa is way more, like, it seems reserved, but they're more disciplined and well behaved. Wait, I'm getting somewhere. Let me get to America now. Now with America, the thing about America is that everybody, yes, like you said earlier, are lenient, and there are kids who are disrespectful and loose and reckless or whatever, but they have the resources to do a lot with it. But the difference is Americans don't utilize that resource.
They don't.
You have a lot of hold on. You have a lot of high school dropouts.
Access
But
is what we're talking about. That's enough.
But wait. Is it enough if we're not using it?
Listen,
What does it
this
matter
is
if
my
we're not
point.
using
This
it?
is my
We're not
point.
using it.
This is my point. Like, we're talking about, y'all talking about like privileges and stuff like that. Like the privileges of like, oh, like, okay, you can FaceTime. You're saying that Milan was talking about, oh, he has the privilege of saying FaceTime, all that. You have the privilege to even think about family structure being important to you and being connected to, because you're not worried about the same things they're there. People in Africa are sitting there laughing at the Americans talking about, oh, I wish I was born there because I want to be close to my family, because they're like, yo, you eating though.
Yes.
You eating,
She's
you
feeling what
working,
I'm
you got
feeling.
clothes, and even if you don't have those things, you got a government that's willing to shell out some money to help you out.
But
Yes.
that's the
So,
reason why
this is my point. But my point is that if we're going back to the question is asking you, what not only are the differences, but ultimately which life is gonna offer you more. You're all talking about eventually, yes, basing your child in the culture, but bringing them back to the States because it's ultimately
The best.
it's the best. They have the most. It's if they choose not to do nothing with that, that's on your child.
Yes.
But
That's
the
why
fact that they
Africa suffers. No. That mentality. That's why Africa suffers. Nah, that's why. No. Let me reach my point.
Let me say something real quick. Here in America, we are black. When we come here, these white people don't see us as Ghanaian, Nigerian,
this is a
Congolese. Wait. We do have the freedom, but they here in America, they are pushing us to be stuck in the system. Yes, we can get this for free, and if we are struggling, we can get welfare and we can get food stamps. But as soon as you get into that system, you get stuck in that system, because as soon as you get a job, now I don't have to work and I get it for free. But if I do work a little bit, they're gonna take my food stamps from me, and I can't get food for free. There's people that's working 9 to 5 hard jobs, and their refrigerators are empty here in America. But in Ghana or in Africa, those kids, okay, yeah, you got food, yeah, it was free, but you're not living a real life. You're not taking advantage of all the opportunities that you're quote unquote here to have. In Africa, if you don't work, you don't get food. You do not eat. If you don't work, you can't feed your children. That's why they get that structure.
But
That's why they have that
you're talking about if you do.
Even based on that, like at the end of the day, even if you yourself don't have the money to buy food, there's somebody that you can go to. There's there's a family member that you can go to. They be like, oh, did you eat today?
I think it's a matter of what you value, because at this point, like I went to Ghana, like I don't understand why y'all don't think about healthcare and all this kind of stuff, but people were like, yo, I just need money to get from point A to point B, and we're talking about money that's the equivalent of $1. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it's like, it's a matter of, it's not like one is better than the other. It's just a matter of like your experience has allowed you to prefer, to want something over the other. Yes. Because you are Americanized, you're gonna be like, yes, I need to be based in that culture, because you're not worried about what someone at home is saying, like, yo, I just want the actual ability.
That's a dangerous mentality.
But
I'm gonna tell you. Let me tell you. No. Let me say. Wait. I love you. Happy birthday. Let me explain to you why that's a dangerous mentality. That we're having that. Yo, America's better. The reason, if we keep thinking America is better, Africa is never gonna get better.
But here's
because
my thing.
we're always running.
No. I hear you. Let me to that point too.
Everybody's always running away from Africa.
But
Everybody's staying running.
Africa's not working. The system is not
so
working.
we can make it work. Like, come on, but we can make it work.
You're doing that because of what you learned here. You know that shits don't work, and you can compare that.
Who grew up in Africa and still have the mentality to make it better.
But if you understand those systems, you don't have the resources. You understand those systems because you're here.
What do you mean there's no resources?
No, I'm not saying there's no resources.
How can you fix what you don't know, right? You're based on, if you have exposure to America, you can understand how to make Ghana or whatever part in Africa better. That's what I'm saying.
But how is that disagreeing with what I'm saying?
I'm not disagreeing with you. I've been telling you I've been agreeing with you this whole time. I was trying to get my girl to understand me. Like, we started screaming at each other, but I've been telling her the whole time, girl, I'm with you. I agree with you. We both want to raise our kids back home. We both also want to bring our kids back so that they can get a world of knowledge and bring it back and, be overall great, well-rounded kids.
But even with the whole privilege situation, I feel like I appreciate, like, if I was just born in America, I don't understand that privilege. The reason why I can tell you that yes, I have this privilege is because I was born there and I understand the differences.
I don't think it's fair because I wasn't born in Africa, but I definitely understand. Or at least I have a sense of understanding of what's going on there because of how the structure at home was.
It's different though.
We're talking about American versus Africa. The French system is completely different.
It's not about French. Even if I was born here, it doesn't matter. Yeah. The fact that I'm born in the Western country and my mom is an African woman that had taught me African discipline at home, I have an understanding better than
Sure. But again, you have to remember
you've never been eaten up by mosquitoes. You never you just never had that experience. Listen,
that's punishment. Like you said.
How's that punishment? You don't get eaten by mosquitoes in America? Get out of here, son. Nah, bro.
You've never been eaten by mosquitoes.
Be serious.
Why would you want to take your kids to Africa where they'll be eaten by mosquitoes? I'm not listening.
Y'all get this retarded sometimes.
I know that with America, like we have access with social media, movies, and things to kind of see what life back home is like. But if you've never gotten eaten up by mosquitoes or had the bread lady deliver bread to your house or just have the fan milk, there's just so many experiences that you can only be there to appreciate it.
Yo, honestly, the way I look at it is like this. Africa is not a poor country. It has resources, we're just not using it.
That's not a country. Which makes it poor.
I mean, I said that. Cut that off. Throw the whole episode away. Yeah, no. I got heated up, and I was just like, all right, listen.
Continue.
All right,
Land.
All right, the thing is, Africa is not a poor continent at all. The thing about it is we have so much resources, and America. A lot of people don't know this. America is a consuming nation. They consume. They don't produce. That's all they do.
Yes, I agree.
So the problem with it is that if we think that, all right, America is better, America is going to just stay better mentally, while Africa just, stays whack or poor, whatever. It'll just stay in that position because a lot of people run away from Africa because they feel like America is better. But if we build the mentality of, we're gonna make Africa better, I promise you, it will be way better out there. People will be running to Africa before they even think about it.
People are doing that now. They see that there's an opportunity, and they're seeing that, okay, just because I'm here doesn't mean that I can't take all my collective experiences here and help improve where my parents grew up.
Let me be really clear. I do believe that Africa is the better continent overall. It just in terms of resources, potential, all of that. But what I'm saying is that even in acknowledging that, I can still say that there are Western worlds that are just handling things. They've taken our resources and managed to create bigger things than we have with it. And so that's why I can say I can learn from what this place has done and then bring it back to bring my continent up to the level that I believe that it can be. But we can't just ignore the fact that, listen, right now, we might not necessarily know what to really do with all the things that we have. It's been sitting with us and we haven't done what is necessary with it.
And part of that's psychological.
Yes.
That's why is education so trash here? Because they don't want people to know what's going on
in the
there.
world.
Yeah.
Which is why Africa is better.
I think it's best to raise your kids in for example, I'm from Nigeria, so I would say Nigeria because I feel like over there, despite the fact that you don't have as much opportunities over there as in America, I feel like when you have little to work with, sometimes that forces you to make the best out of it. And I feel like it also teaches, I feel like there's a lot of discipline in Nigeria, a whole lot. So I feel like, it creates a survivor mentality within the person who's living there. So that's why I personally feel like it's good to raise your kids in Nigeria.
Africa is poor. I don't know that's the opinion. It's red and black. Africa is poor. We are poor.
I do agree that there's too many layers to just say a blanket statement like Africa's poor. America's poor. You know what I'm saying? America's a land of opportunity, but most of the people that live in this country are living below the poverty line, and that's a fact.
Thanks for watching, and if you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you next time.